In the interest of time, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. You had your welcome, so I'll welcome again. Welcome to this important conference. What better topic to have than how to address the achievement gap, especially in this day and time where we've made a lot of progress, but there's still huge disparities with regards to both quantity and quality of education. I'm not going to take too much time with introductions beyond just naming the panelists as well as their affiliation. And then I'm going to pose about a set of 3 questions, which they're going to answer in their opening remarks. And then after that, we'll have a discussion. I'll start with myself. I'm Darrick Hamilton. I'm a professor here at the New School. I focus on what I call stratification economics, looking at how groups compete for preferred outcomes in a host of venues, including education. So I'll start with David Banks, who is at the Eagle Academy Foundation. The second, Edmund Gordon, and Edmund is at Columbia University. Third is John Duval, and he's at the New York City Department of Education. Fourth, we have Tracey Garcia-Mitchell, and she's at the New York City Department of Youth and Community Development. Then we have fifth is Kirkland Vaughans, and he just told me, just like Sarah Vaughans, so very eloquent here, who's at Adelphi University and Hempstead Union Free School District. So we'll start all the way down to my left, and the questions that was posed to them was one, how can we address the racial achievement gap, both now in terms of concrete steps, and what are some long-term venues or avenues that we can do to address the achievement gap? The second question is to tell us about what you're doing. All of them are actively engaged in doing work to address the achievement gap. So what are you doing, and are there some success stories that you're willing to share? And then the third question has to do with the era that we're in. In the age of President Obama, or what I like to call putative post-racial America, is there any data or research to support any notion that the election has made a difference in, dare I say, inspiring young minds? Okay.
Want me to open?
Yes, please.
Okay. First of all, is it still morning? Still good morning. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Spielberg for the invitation to join you here at this conversation, as well as all the members of the panel. But particularly for me, it's a real thrill to be here with Dr. Gordon to my right, who I consider the venerable Dr. Edmund Gordon, who is telling me now that he's just shy of 94 years. Wow. And I think that is... Still kicking, maybe not as high. Right, but certainly a role model certainly for me and so many others. And I just thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And so I want to say I'm going to mix up a couple of these things in here. First of all, to say what I do and who I am. I am the president and CEO of the Eagle Academy Foundation, and our organization came into existence almost 12 years ago. Really started by the 100 Black Men. 100 Black Men of New York is a civic organization, professional men who've always given back to the community, started by people like David Dinkins and Roscoe Brown and Charlie Rangel and so many others. And what we've done maybe about 12, 13 years ago, we were looking at some data that really moved us. We had always mentored young people. We had always provided dollars for scholarships and those kinds of things. But what we were looking at some data that said, first of all, that the graduation rate for black boys in New York City at that time was 32%. Right? And so, I mean, you could line up 10 young men in front of the stage and tell 7 of them to go and have a seat. You're not even going to graduate from high school. That was number one. And the second piece of data was that we were recognizing that back in 1920, 90% of black children grew up with a father at home. And if you fast forward it 40 years later to 1960, the number was still as high as 80%. And the number is just a little over 30% today. It's a real kind of connection between those two. And then finally, the way that it really kind of presents itself was through this report that Columbia University put out, which said that 75%, if you haven't heard this before, you should really, 75% of the inmates for the entire state of New York come from 7 neighborhoods in New York City. Let me just wrap your mind around that. It's a big enough deal if you'd say that 75% of the state's prison population, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, come from New York City. But this issue we're talking about is not an issue in Bayside, Queens. It's an issue in very specific zip codes. It's what we refer to as the prison pipeline. It's an issue that we have panel discussions about. No knock on this panel. It's an issue that we have conferences about, and we need it. We need the analysis, we need the research, we need all of those things. But it seemed to me that at the end of the day, it seemed like the most that you could hope for in terms of actually doing something to provide a response was a good after-school program for 15 or 20 boys, and that was about it. And so with that, our organization decided to create the Eagle Academy for Young Men as the first all-boys public high school in New York City. I want to be very clear. The Eagle Academy is not a charter school, it's a public school. And we started it with a group of 9th grade boys back in 2004. And we have now gone from a model that started as a high school to starting at grade 6, recognizing that we really needed to start earlier than the 9th grade. So we start at grade 6, and we take these young men all the way through grade 12. We started with 100 boys back in 2004, and today we have over 2,000 young men between our school, which we started in the South Bronx. Then we went to Ocean Hill, Brownsville, and Brooklyn. We went to South Jamaica, Queens. Cory Booker was the mayor of Newark, New Jersey at the time and asked us to come to Newark, New Jersey. With our 4th academy, we came back into the city to Central Harlem, and this past September opened up on the island of Staten Island. So we're in every borough in the city, in addition to being in Newark, New Jersey. When each one of our schools grows to full capacity, we'll have over 4,000 young men that are part of this Eagle network. And we're now getting ready to launch what we call the Eagle Institute, which is going to serve to train schools and school systems around the country on how to best work with boys, because I think that that's what's most needed. We talk about this issue so much, but the reality is that our teachers who are working in our schools go through schools of education who provide very little training in how to work with boys and how to work with boys of color. And recognizing that you have to recognize boys are different from girls. And this is not to suggest that everyone needs to go to a single gender school. I don't believe that. But I certainly think that single gender schools need to be part of the overall solution. But for those who are working in traditional co-ed schools, being able to provide an opportunity for teachers to be trained in how to work with young men. And I'm going to just leave you with one final example. My mother and father raised 3 boys in New York City. I'm the oldest of 3. They had me when they were 19 years old. My brother Philip came 11 months after me. We were born in the same year. Go do the math on that one. My brother Terry came 2 years later. My mother had 3 boys in Brooklyn by the time she was 22 years old. I did well in school. I liked school. My brother, who was 11 months younger than me, started in the same grade, which I think was a mistake. His development was not quite ready at that time. And then he paled in comparison because I'm doing well and making good grades. I was kind of that ideal student. My brother had all the potential and brilliance in the world, but did not demonstrate it on a regular basis. And subsequently, the teachers did not have the same level of high expectations for him. The teachers didn't understand how to deal with all this boy energy. When I heard these young men on the panel earlier talking about relevant curriculum and school not being boring, a lot of our teachers don't fully recognize how important that is when you're working with boys. And so Philip actually struggled, and the teachers recommended him for special education, wanted to medicate him, like what happens with so many of the boys just like him all over this country. And long story short, Philip wound up actually graduating by the skin of his teeth, got accepted to one school, Lincoln University, one of the oldest historically black colleges in the country, and that was when the light went on, and he came into his own. And his teachers would have never, ever imagined that for Philip, that he'd go on to become a college graduate. But not only did he do that, he followed my father into the New York City Police Department. My dad was a lieutenant on the NYPD, and Philip joined the job, and they had the same name. My father's junior, my brother's the third. And so it was a big story. A few years later, because he had my father as his mentor and his guide, he got promoted and became a sergeant, one rank below my father. A couple of years later, he got promoted again and became a lieutenant. So father and son, both at the same rank on the NYPD, the largest police department in the country. Story got better. A year later, Philip got promoted again to captain, one rank above my father. And my father said, it's time to retire. The day that you have to salute your own son, it's time to go. Philip went on to become a deputy inspector and then an inspector. Then he made the rank of chief with 1 star in his uniform. Then he made the rank of 2-star chief, then 3-star chief, and then ultimately 4-star chief, what they call the chief of the department, which is the highest ranking uniform status on the NYPD. Many of you may have heard in the news, in the media in the last several months, my brother, Chief Banks, who stepped down from the NYPD. But so that's my little brother. That's the one who the teachers never thought Philip had the potential to do much of anything, while he was always brilliant. But it was what was I see as a tremendous failing within our system, which is to recognize the brilliance and the potential, to know how to nurture and to develop it, not to cast aspersions or judgment when somebody's in the 3rd grade, and to say what they ultimately are going to be or not going to be. But yet, I'm at a place where I'm far beyond just having discussions about this. What's needed within the system is a deeper level of training and development for those who are charged with training our children. They're not all in developing and working and teaching our children. It's not that the people standing in front of the room are racist or have any bad intentions. They don't know. They don't know, and they've not been exposed to best practices for working with young people. That's the work that the Eagle Academy is engaged in, and that's part of what we've been doing, and I'm certainly looking forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, Prince, and thanks for inviting me. Although as I dug out from about a foot of snow this morning, I wasn't sure I thanked you. I had prepared some notes, but as I sat listening to the morning panel, and then following one of my proteges, David Banks, one I'm very, very proud of, I think I need to shift what I wanted to talk about. One of the questions, I think, is what do we do about the achievement gap? When James Weldon Johnson and his brother wrote the Negro National Anthem, there's a line that they had in there that I have thought a great deal about in recent years as I think about the achievement gap. It's a line that goes, when when hope unborn had died. When hope unborn had died. Before the late John Ogbu died, he was doing research on young Latino and black men out in Compton, California. And in one of his reports, he makes the observation that at 9 and 10 and 11, these young kids recognized that if they finished high school, their chances for being employed would be about 50%. If they finished college, that their chances for moving to a higher level position increased, but it increased to about a third of the level of a English-speaking white person. And then by some strange calculus that I've never understood, he predicted that these young people's estimates of the likelihood that they could make it bore some relationship to the energy that they were willing to invest in preparation for it. And one of his explanations was that these kids, many of them, without hope, with a diminished view of opportunity and reduced support, foundered. They failed. They dropped out. So that one of the things we've got to think about as we think about closing the achievement gap is doing something about youngsters' perception of hope. Now let me jump to the morning panel. I told Pedro that he had stolen one of my lines. He was calling our attention to the fact that this was not just a New York problem, not just a problem for young black men, Latino men in New York, but it was a national problem. Now, he's quite correct. But I'll go in one better. If you read much of the international economic and international education news, in all of the technologically advanced societies in the world, Europe and in Asia, young men are in trouble. It's not just black men. And it may be that our young women are in trouble, but because of different expectations that many of our societies place on women, it hasn't reached them yet. And what's the source of it? The chap, I think, who was sitting in this position earlier this morning, I think was trying to tell us that he took a somewhat collectivist approach to things. I'll tell you, I'm a socialist. I believe that collective action in human societies makes a lot more sense than the individualism that we have been directed toward, that we are privileged. Now, what's that got to do with hope? We are currently in the advanced stage of capitalism. Capitalism which has done wonders for most countries in the world. When it arose during the period of serfdom, it was a progressive move. Even in the 20th century, Franklin Roosevelt was able to give it a progressive turn. And many people claim that he rescued the country by rescuing capitalism. I've got 5 minutes left. I knew I shouldn't come. Okay, what can I say to you in 5 minutes? I'll finish. Roosevelt did rescue capitalism, and he rescued the nation because he turned capitalism to nation building again, to building up the major resource of a nation, which is its population. And one of the great things that happened during that period, at the end of his career, and actually afterward, because it was post-World War II, was the nation's deliberate investment, its affirmative action for the poor men of this country, and the poor men and women of this country, and they weren't just minority groups. And what they were able to do with programs like the Veterans Benefits Program, GI Bill, they positioned this country for the role that it was to play at the end of the 20th century as the economic leader of the world. We couldn't have filled that position if we had not invested in the development of these farm boys and uneducated city kids who could not have supported the end of 20th century America and its place in the world. We're in the same position now. The folk we are talking about are going to be the majority in this country soon. And if we don't find ways in which to develop them, we're not going to be, as a nation, in position to be a major player in the world. We probably won't even be a player in the world. So that while I would applaud the many things that we have identified in these interventions we have heard about today, and in my long list here, what I did was to go through the work of my several students and try to identify the things that were working. We've got to do those things. But we as citizens have got to think about the kind of society in which we live and the political economy that drives it, because that economy that has worked so well for my generation is not working for these younger people, and is going to work even less well for them, and they are smart enough to perceive the absence of hope. And in the absence of hope, there's very little engagement.
Can everyone hear me all right? Good afternoon, everyone.
No.
Just want to say thank you for having me here today. I think I'll start by telling a quick story that gets at, I think, what's actually very difficult in the education space, which is the absolute insane complexity of what a classroom actually is. And I tell this story because I think it gets to highlight how some of the larger macro questions that we talk about filter into day-to-day and what a school actually looks like. So I'll tell you a quick story just because I actually happened to volunteer to co-teach a class. I had the pleasure last year of leading a high school redesign lab, which was trying to get at how do we redesign high schools so that they're competency-based and culturally relevant, right? To specifically serve Black and Latino youth. And so I can talk ad nauseum about that, but that's not really what I'm going to talk about. It's really that I actually volunteered this semester to teach a class, right, 1 day a week at one of these new high schools that we opened. And it's a social justice elective, right? And I had done it because I had spent some time in the school last fall and saw that this classroom wasn't necessarily working the way I want. So I was like, okay, well, what better way to try and help it work than actually get in there and try and do it? Right, and so the thrust of the past 3 weeks has been focusing on Emmett Till, right? And I'm sure everyone here probably knows, right, what that thing is about. And I kind of decided that this is what I was going to teach because I was like, hey, he was 14 years old when this happened. I made it relate to high school students. I'm going to try and teach in a different way. I'm going to push the curriculum out to kids via technology and have them, create knowledge, right, to try and answer a performance task and all this sort of stuff. And the bottom line, I think, is that the class sucks. Both me and the person who's in that classroom are struggling to make it happen and make it real and live. And just last Thursday, I pulled a young man aside after the classroom. And I said, "Hey, come on, why? Why are you not doing your work? Why are you behind? And why are you not engaged?" And he literally looked at me and he said, "This is boring. I don't want to learn about this. I don't care about it." Right, and so from my point of view, I was like, oh gosh, I thought this would be something that would be interesting, right? And there's a tension there between what I think this young man should know, right, as part of a curriculum that talks about his history, his cultural history, and what he actually cares about, which is not that, right? And a more modern version of what's going on around civil rights today. And so, in the scope of a classroom, I want to be clear that, think about what's going on there and that a teacher is being asked to do a number of things. One, deliver something that's engaging to a young person. Two, simultaneously ascertain whether or not their responses to a young person, perhaps a young man, are part of their own racial bias, or maybe just part of a 14-year-old, right, rejecting authority as part of their own domain identity formation and becoming an adult, right? Oh, and by the way, is Emmett Till going to be on the Regents exam, right, this year, right? And should I be teaching this or should I be teaching something else? Right, that's actually going to be part of the policy environment that's going to hold me accountable, right, as a teacher. And so I think when we begin to talk about, conversations that talk about, the racial, I'm going to call the opportunity gap for to explain in a second. When we begin to talk about the racial opportunity gap, right, in classrooms, there are a lot of things that are going on that is putting a lot of burden on teachers to figure out these things in real time in a way that's actually very, very, very challenging. And I think to Mr. Banks's point, often trying to figure out things that they are not equipped to actually figure out. And so, I think that it'll bleed into what we're doing with the SI, and I can talk more about that. I really wanted to comment quickly on language as paramount, right? We talk about the racial achievement gap, and that's here today. I think part of what we're doing with ESI and have attempted to do with ESI is, to me, in my personal point of view, right, the idea of calling it the racial achievement gap, right, puts the locus of responsibility on the young person, right? The opportunity gap is what's going on, right, in our school system today, right? The opportunity gap is the locus of responsibility is on the institution. Right? I am here to represent that institution, and I'm hopeful that we can begin to have a different sort of conversation that puts the locus of intervention and the locus of accountability on the institutions themselves. And I think that's been the refreshing, frame of the day so far, because I have sat in a number of occasions and in a number of conferences over the past 2 to 3 months where it's consistently a sort of, young person, if you actually work hard and do the right things and all that sort of stuff, then your path will be paved for you. And it's not true. And I think we need to be explicit and accountable. And as an institution, I think the Department of Education needs to be explicit and accountable for that sort of thing. So to transition into ESI, ESI is part of, as Melanie Hartzog, my colleague from this morning, talked about, was a public-private partnership, right, as part of the Young Men's Initiative. And ESI was really rooted in two single questions. One, how do we actually raise the bar, right, for Black and Latino youth and raise the standards that are required to be a full participant in the 21st century labor force and economy. I think everyone sort of knows that a high school diploma these days is not going to be enough, right, to get you a living wage job where you can support yourself and your family. And then two, how do we actually organize a large-scale research and development initiative, and where, again, is the locus of intervention? And so what we did as part of ESI was to really relaunch the design challenge about 3 years ago. 80 schools were invited to apply, and the sort of ethos behind it is, the people that are closest to the ground day to day, principals and teachers, probably have, right, some of the best ideas about how to adequately serve Black and Latino youth, right? And so we organized a design challenge to do just that. It was a competitive bid process. Schools actually submitted, strategies that they wanted to try, with the help of some investment over the course of 3 years. And so, we're coming to the end of year 3 now. We're in the process of curating, I think, the best strategies from the field that were really generated by schools themselves, So that's really just an organizing principle, I think, that gets at the strategy of what ESI is attempting to do. We're learning a lot about how to organize something like that. And the one thing that we did maintain as sort of a core focus that we would actually push out from a central perspective is this idea of culturally relevant pedagogy and getting at the sort of mindset bias around adults that are in the schools. We invested in 4 organizations. Metro Center was one of them. Dr. Nagira's shop at NYU, to really bring teachers together to begin to talk about what is their implicit sort of bias when they are engaging with young people in the classroom day to day. And so, I think we've learned a lot. I could sit here and talk a lot about what we've learned. Hopefully you guys will ask questions about what I've learned. I'll be able to address them more readily. But that's sort of what I've been up to, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
So, good afternoon. So when Judy asked, and she did ask personally, I'm not normally sitting on panels, Tracey, you have to come sit on a panel and talk about all the programs that you guys are doing and what we're doing together. And I was like, well, okay, without a thought, I'll do it. And the next thing you know, about a week later, we get these exotic questions, like, what are you doing? Like, how do you feel about the achievement gap and all these disparities that are happening? And I said, well, Judy, I don't know. And then I didn't talk to her for a while, and she sends me a text. She's like, call me if anything, don't worry about it. You'll do fine. So I said, okay, I'll still do it. I haven't copped out yet. And then I listened to all the panel of experts and what everyone says, and it's interesting that I have like the similar stats, and I'm quoting most of the same sources, and so we're all looking at the same research, which is really good, so I'm not gonna spit that all out again. But I will say, as an agency, we are a city agency, and what we do is that we do work with youth in the community, and our goal as an agency is to build up the community and to see the resources in the community that's there, as well as the youth that are already in the community, and build them up. The young man before in the panel, he talked about, I think his question posed to him was, if someone could do something more, or what could be more for him, like the Exalt program. He talked about, did anyone here like Boys and Girls Clubs? And can you not just have them, but can you have them in my community, in my space? And what we do at DYCD is we find that is crucially important, to have something that a young person can go to and be a part of and be proud of what is in their community. For as bad as all of the East New Yorks and the Brownsville and South Jamaica, there are assets in the community. And you always, when you thought, there was also another theory of taking them out of the city and letting them explore other places. And we believe in that too, but the point is to bring resources in, and so that they can be powerful within the place that they live, and they eat and they sleep and they reside with their friends. And I think as an agency, we do that. I'm not saying we're the best at what we do or how we do it, but when we looked at some of the statistics that shows where the pockets of poverty are and where the needs are, we do a lot of our programming that is specifically tailored to specific zip codes. So when we're putting out an initiative, we always use that model. Another piece that we use, which is crucial, is that we have an agency, and I've been fortunate to be in both administrations, and they both have the same philosophies when it comes to positive youth development. And they see the young people as key voices in not only shaping what they want to participate in, but also shaping in how they participate, when they participate, how frequently they participate, and what's important to them. And I'll talk a little bit also about some of the initiatives that we think are attempting to address these. But just going back to another piece, the Young Men's Initiative. We also have we are part of the Young Men's Initiative. We run a very small mentoring program. So the folks mentioned earlier the size of the amount of money when it initially started in the Bloomberg administration, but my agency only received $1 million of that funding. And with that funding, our target was to recruit 75 volunteer mentors, hopefully young men of color, and also to target 300 young boys in specific grades 5th through 9 to be mentored by these young men. And the money was dropped on the table, and that was pretty much the charge. So we had to go back and we had to design, well, what does that mean? So that means looking at the positive youth principles, what does a young person need? And I believe the previous panel touched on that as well. You need, first and foremost, we highlighted establishing a relationship with a caring adult and having that point of intervention. So it doesn't say that education is not important, and it doesn't say that all of the math and sciences are not important, but a young person needs to feel that they have someone to talk to. And then someone who, whether it's just showing them an exit sign, pointing them in the right direction, or just having a conversation with them, but establishing that relationship with a caring adult. So we took all that research and we built a model program around that. Then we had the fortunate pleasure of talking with the new school. And the new school was very interested in being a part of YMI. But it wasn't just for show. They really wanted to be involved with YMI. And by doing so, we spent about 7 months creating a syllabus and a curriculum to establish a course that students here at Lang could take. And it opened up a whole new world to me. I had the pleasure of working with Judy in her office. And we spent a good time over the summer creating a course called Youth Mentoring in the City. And what that entailed in a nutshell is that any student of Lang or the new school who wanted to sign up and take the course, not only did they receive credit for the course, but they also had to commit to 1 year. We're talking 2 semesters, 2 consecutive semesters to be a part of the program. And what was even more interesting to them, was what we sold to them, was that our mentoring programs are located in 25 NYCHA community centers, and they are scattered throughout the 5 boroughs. So the big pitch was like, you come in, you want to see the city, we're going to show you the real city, right? So we had a mentoring program in Staten Island. We have mentoring programs in Brownsville, East New York. We had it in Bushwick. So kids would come and they would sign up for the class, and Judy and I co-led the class. And we found that we got a great response. We tested it out. We said, I think it was 15 slots, and then that was like a waiting list to like 25. So then we realized, okay, we have to make the class larger, which was excellent. And then in doing so, we got offered another year between the school and the agency. Unfortunately, the program is not in effect right now, but we still partner with the new school in other ways, and we do hope to have something happening again very soon. The good news is that of all the students that have come through the class, 7 of them still remain committed not only to their mentees, but to the centers, to the communities that we've exposed them to. More specifically, we have 2 volunteers who are in Cypress Hills, New York, and they are working with these young boys that they've been with for 3 years now. Way beyond their commitment. They've already got the A in the class. We've already given them credit. It's a done deal. I have seen them on other functions. I'm responsible for coordinating these large events that happen when we bring all the mentees and mentors together. And what's most beautiful is that I get to see the students in the class that I had the pleasure of sitting and teaching with. And they're still there with the same volunteer that comes out who just wants to be a mentor in the community. That's one of the programs that we run and we have. We also, DYCD is responsible for managing all of the Beacon programs. Another piece that's out there, which is highly touted in the media, is the community schools that are coming out. I think that if anyone has an opportunity to look at the research on that or look at the information that's out there, in a nutshell, it speaks to all the infrastructure that a young person needs just in order to survive. I don't care if you live in the urban, in the inner city, if you live in the suburbs. Young people, all people, always need resources and infrastructure. And sometimes we lose way on how to get them or how to provide them to young people. But I just want to add that I'll be here for questions if you want to know about any more of the other programs. And thank you.
Thanks. I want to thank New School for inviting me, and whether or not I had been invited doesn't matter. I invite them for having this. It's very important, so I double thank you. I want to go to, I've been a school psychologist and I'm a clinical psychologist, and so I use all of my training where I am. I was asked to talk about certain questions. I'm going to try and address them, but unfortunately I have about 40 years of working with black boys and Hispanic boys who can oftentimes be oppositional, and some of their characteristics have passed off on me, so I'm kind of oppositional too after all these years. So I'm kind of addressing by way of coming in from left field some of the questions, so please tolerate me. I'm going to go first to Dr. Gordon, Professor Gordon, who addressed history here, and which I think is so very, very important. Because most Americans know history as far as what they served for last Thanksgiving dinner, okay? And that's the way it is. You talked about World War II and afterwards. We had the GI Bill. One of the very pragmatic reasons for the GI Bill has to do with the fact you brought millions of men home from combat who were sitting down idle. That's a very dangerous situation. There were no jobs. So put them in school, give them something to do. So it wasn't just a nice idea, it was a very pragmatic idea. We have trained them to be violent, they've acted in very violent ways, let's find something for them to do real fast until jobs come along. So we have been very innovative in these ways from a historical background. Dr. Gordon also mentioned a fellow scholar by the name of John Ogbu, if I have his name correct. And he was a great researcher, but he also focused a lot on what is commonly or popularly become to be known as black students, especially black males, seeing education as a white thing. And I don't accept that. I think that black people in general and black people historically have been very patriotic when it comes to education, seeing education as a primary route out, even when in fact it's understood you will still face discrimination with or without those degrees. The students I work with, by and large, are proud of those black and Hispanic students who do well and feel ashamed that they're not doing well. So we have both situations there. I work with students, black and Hispanic, who are very much downtrodden. My philosophy with them is, how do you play a poor hand well? Since my ship has sailed, my only job here is to help you get yours out of port. Now, you want to stay stuck here, I could go get you a shopping cart now, or we can figure out some other ways for you to live. None of them accept the shopping cart. Okay, so it tells me right from there I've got to find their source of motivation, which is primarily hidden by shame. I know that shame. I've experienced it through my own education, with the fact that after the military, I said I attempted college through the support and help of family members. It was a big joke at the high school I had gone to. Ooh, Kirkland going to college? Whoa, whoa, whoa. And they weren't the only one who was uncertain about that. So was I. So it wasn't that I had this crowd over here that was being hostile or unsupportive. I was unsupportive to myself until I saw myself doing well. So the other thing, other aspect of this, seeing education as a white thing, really, it's the nation that sees education as a white thing. If you really heard the statistics that have been reported to you today, they evidence a vision that says black and Hispanic males in particular should not be educated, and cannot be educated. President Obama has a big push now for community colleges. And that's a great thing, but the problem with it is that Black and Hispanic males on a national basis, 80% of them either drop out or fail out. So we're not doing well there. Community colleges, I think, have a success rate of about 37% completing the bachelor's degree. So a lot of us have to go back and re-examine what is going on. Now, I was asked to speak a little bit about what do. I do a whole lot of things. Just 5? Okay, thank you. I'm trying to speak real fast, and you're still counting on me. Okay, the sister is good. She says, I'm gonna handle this dude. Okay. So I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's called the HEOP or EOP, depending on whether or not. About when I first came here to New York, I was having a drink with a guy who was the director of HEOP at CW Post College, and he was asking me as a psychologist if I could help him select better students who would graduate from college in this HEOP or EOP program. And I told him, no, I couldn't do that at all, but I could help him with his staff ensure that they would graduate. Those students now, I've been doing that training of staff, not of students, graduate on par with their white counterparts. So they graduate with a B+ average or better. The other thing is, even in the high school, we talk about, you talked about being a socialist, right? Here's what has to happen in the long run. That socialist position has to be relearned. What has to happen in order to change is teachers and their unions, whether they like it or not, their plight is tied up with the education of poor Black and brown people. And so there has to be a coalition building here because the interests are really the same. And that has to be examined. It's not going to happen. Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House, said, all politics is local. I believe that. So President Obama make federal statements, and I'm glad that he does. I admire the man. The man is brilliant. But down here on the ground, we need to be doing our own thing and not wait for President Obama to put that money out. We need to be changing our own programs. No parent, we say the parent should this and the parent should that. Parents, when they're called in to schools, they're not being paid. They lose a day's pay. So we're asking them to risk losing their job, losing their home, etc. There needs to be a coalition building. We talk about it takes a village to raise a child. I'm in agreement with that, but it also takes a village to hold an adult. So if we don't have communities, the parents don't feel like they have agency to support their own child. My wife is also a school psychologist, and many community members, neighbors come by our house, and we hold the CSE right there in our house. The CSE is the Committee for Special Education. And so we write those letters for those students saying, we strongly advise the following, if not, we will be at the next meeting. So we don't have to attend those meetings. We need to have a community base where parents feel supported and parents feel in mind, feel that the schools can hold them in mind. The only way that's going to happen is for teachers and teachers' unions to turn around and begin to collaborate with the same parents who were having problems having their children educated. Did I finish on time? Thank you.
So all the panelists have given us great things to think about and in which to respond as well. I'm going to give a brief overview, and I guess serve as somewhat of a discussion, and then open it up to the audience. Some themes that came out. Teacher expectations are key. That was one big thing. The teachers help shape our students, and there are examples of untapped resources that need to be tapped. There was also themes about behavioral responses on the part of students to a discriminatory structure at large. So what happens if you face a discriminatory labor market? Well, you know, some things, and there was some tension, there was some responses. For example, Kirkland brought up the issue of, he trains his students to think about, how do you play a poor hand well, right? So knowing you're going to face discrimination, you could imagine there could be two responses. One could be, I can give up. Why invest in something in which I'm going to get a low return? On the other hand, and this came out in the previous panel as well, you might overinvest. You might say, well, in order to achieve, I got to work twice as hard. So really it becomes an empirical question. It seems like the norms in our country is that theoretically that the dominant norm is that students give up because they're going to face discrimination. But we have some examples historically and at least theoretically of actually working harder. There was concepts of the absence of hope, what happens in the absence of hope. Hope is tied very well into, one of the thematic questions was Barack Obama. So hope is a key word that's tied into Barack Obama. And just hope in general. This might be a period in the country where hope is really relevant. One thing I'd like to throw out is that in the absence of hope, you also get the potential for revolutionary change. Some ways, hope could be an opiate to keep people in check if you keep hoping, and rather than take radical change as an initiative. And then the FDR was brought up also, and one thing, and I certainly agree that FDR, one of the things he did was save capitalism from itself, and that was the big historical moment. But another way to think of it is a lot of what we're talking about with education is agency. It's talking about giving people access, giving people the ability to make change, to do things with their lives. That's one of the big points of Amartya Sen called it human capabilities. One of the things that FDR did, in my estimation, was provide people with access to an asset that would appreciate over their lifetime, be it a home, be it a debt-free college education, et cetera, et cetera. And it was that agency that gave that access to an asset, that wealth-building asset that, in my opinion, gave them the resources for agency. There were things about exciting students, a need to excite students, and the tension of, again, the popular rhetoric of onus being on students and students' behavior versus the tension of, no, we have not an achievement gap, but an opportunity gap, meaning that that onus also needs to be placed on the institutions and teachers, things that they can do to address this untapped resources. So they were definitely clear themes throughout. There was the notion of, again, untapped assets, and Tracey brought up the thing about developing relationships with a caring adult, right? So in addition to training teachers to deliver gifted curriculum or curriculum that's advanced to students, we also need sympathetic teachers. That's important. We need teachers that care about the well-being of the students that they're engaged with. And then we ended with revisiting acting white, which is, again, Barack Obama was in the question, so I see him as fair game. In his first speech when he was at the DNC convention back when in 2004, before he was candidate Obama, he mentioned race really one time, and it was in the concept of black people needing to get beyond the slander that somehow a child with a book is acting white. Now, you heard lots of themes that came out today about other areas that we need to address education. That was the theme that was the point that he brought up. And then, as Kirkland pointed out, what does the empirical evidence say? Is it indeed the case that black people, both presently and historically, have rejected education, that it's the domain of white people? I think he had a very astute comment that the societal norm is that it's the domain of white people, and you can see by the ways in which we invest and the ways in which we talk about education that it's considered the purview of whites and not of blacks. We can look at talented and gifted curriculums within schools and see that it's structured in a way that the white students are in the talented curriculum, the advanced curriculum, and black people are in the remedial curriculums. So it definitely is structured. But I think that we have ample evidence and very little evidence to suggest that black people as a group reject education, and the burden of acting white is the reason for underachievement, that blacks fearing they're going to be rejected by their peers. And the last thing I'll say about that is that when we do occur in research, that social science research that has found the phenomenon of acting white, rarely is it found, but when it is found, it's usually found in a very specific context, in a context where the talented and gifted curriculums are indeed segregated. And it's not limited to a black phenomena. You find it with class distinctions as well. When you have structured inequality in curriculum, you might find onuses of acting white. Sure.
It's found in the cultural context, not educational context. Do you want to go to an opera? I've never been to an opera in my life, okay, but I'm highly educated. Do you wear short pants in the wintertime? That's a white thing. Black people don't wear short pants in the wintertime. So those kinds of questions are very skewed and not about education, but about culture. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay.
All right. So in our remaining time, I guess we should go to the audience, and then we also, so we're going to go to the audience, but the panelists might have some reactions as well, so feel free to take the opportunity when responding to questions to react to anything that's been said. Yes.
Luis Reyes, earlier reference was made to Mayor Koch and kibbutz, and I think something may have been lost in not taking note that the kibbutz was a collectivist reality of nation building, capacity building, community building. The mistake was to think of the kibbutz as the Ulpan experience of Jews coming to Israel and having to immerse themselves in Hebrew and in the life of Israel and leave behind the mother countries that Jews were coming from. Unfortunately, the white view of education for Latinos, as well as for African Americans, has that same problem, which is an assumption of subtractive education. Leave your race, leave your culture, leave your language behind when you come to the classroom, the island of Ellis, where we Americanize you. And it seems to me that we have a pope from the third world, and we have a director of the Oscar-winning movie from Mexico, Iñárritu, who was talking about immigrants. He was talking about oppression in his own country and the oppression here. And so it reminds me that part of our relearning is remembering what we taught each other about liberation theology and about pedagogy for liberation, Paulo Freire.
Thank you. Name the book.
Who came to New York and taught us and trained us, along with people like Dr. Edmund Gordon, which is what kind of teachers do we have in the classroom? We have fewer and fewer Black and Latino teachers. I'm assuming that the Eagle Academy doesn't follow that reality, but being Black and Latino by itself does not guarantee liberation of the mind or of the pedagogy. So we have to think of the training and encouragement of young people to go from high school to college to come back and teach. And so I'm interested in the community schools as a way of how do we build and grow our own teachers from our students and from the adults who are caring.
I certainly don't mean to be disrespectful, but I just want to make sure there are going to be other questions, and we have five
Yes.
people here. So
I just needed, as a Puerto Rican, to remind you that in the 1950s, when we came here, we were the Puerto Rican problem. So the deficit view of Black people and of Latinos and of immigrants continues today. And we have to liberate that view. And I'm asking you, how do you see that?
thank you.
I'll just address this with two things we're trying to do. via ESI. One is, so I happen to agree with the sort of collectivist notion of how we go about solving some of these problems, and I think part of what we tried to do over the past couple of years via ESI is curate a really large-scale practitioner community that wants to address some of these issues and dig into them, right? I think one of the saddest and most unfair things, actually, is when you have one teacher in a classroom somewhere, be it East New York or Tremont or wherever it is, that is a brilliant, culturally relevant math teacher, and the students in that classroom get to benefit from that teacher. And that is it. And if you go to a school where they don't have that, hard luck on you. That's not fair to young people, right? And so what we're trying to do in trying to curate a larger practitioner community is how do we take, right, our best-in-class people who know how to do this and stretch their expertise beyond their classroom via technology, via learning communities where we can hopefully, subsidize these teachers to take on different roles in a more expansive sort of way, right? And I think that's part of what we're trying to get at, and it's very hard to do with a city that's as large as New York. On the, people coming into the teaching profession, I think, another avenue we're trying to pursue is, there are a range of adults that work in a school on a daily basis. There are teachers, but there are also community coordinators, paraprofessionals, social workers, guidance counselors. And, one of the things we're trying to figure out is how do we begin to retool, right, or work with our colleagues, Anthony left earlier today, at the UFT to really say what is a different and expanded role for paraprofessionals that actually provide them a pipeline into the teaching profession, right? I think it's a pretty stark fact that our teaching profession looks one way and our paraprofessional community looks the other way. So let's think about how we can actually build pipelines that get the paraprofessional people that are there, most often Black and Latino, right, into the teaching profession, right? And what are apprenticeship type style programs that we can construct that provide the pathway for them to do that and figure out ways to try and subsidize that. And so, that begins to get at some of the issues of trying to get more Black and Latino adults into the classroom. Does that address the issue of, how they teach, liberation pedagogy? No, it doesn't, right? But, we have to start somewhere. And so I think those are two of the things we're trying to do.
Thank you. Right. So we'll go here and then here.
Hello. I want to acknowledge being in the presence of greatness with Dr. Gordon. To be of his age and to be so extraordinarily engaged for as long as he has been is just astounding. My mother turned 94 last month, and she was an educator, taught us directly back college as a professor, and I only wish that you were as sharp as attentive as you are, sir. So my question is directed to you. At the risk of sounding a tad bit provocative, you talked about hope, and you introduced the notion much along the lines as I view things. So my question to you, sir, is this. Where do you, over the course of your life and leading up till now and beyond, where do you find hope in what I would characterize as an environment of hopelessness? It's certainly not a pie-in-the-sky sort of hope, but obviously it resonates and comes from a very different place. And I thought it would benefit certainly myself and others in this room to get a little bit of a perspective based on your lifelong work and your continued efforts about where it is that you find hope, if you will, in what I would characterize as a relatively hopeless situation.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to hold your response for 1 second because I just got a note from the timekeeper, and we know how powerful that timekeeper is, that we have 5 minutes left. So if you could hold that question, I'm going to let everybody answer their questions, and then I'm going to let the panelists respond to all the questions one time.
Hello. A little too short for this. Hi, my name is Hannah. I am a teacher at a charter school in Brooklyn. Thank you all so much for being here. It's so great to be part of such a wonderful event. So when I go back to school this afternoon, I am curious from any of you, what mindset do you think is the most important, or if you could talk to teachers about a mindset that you want them to bring to their classrooms and to their students every day, particularly when teaching students of color, what mindset would that be, and how would you know that that mindset was living in that teacher's classroom?
Okay, all right. Question? We're taking all the questions at once, and then each panelist is going to respond to what they'd like to respond to. So.
My name is Sally Curtis. I'm a clinical psychologist with an office right around the corner from here. And I guess there were two issues that I wanted to focus on. I think one was what Kirkland said about, education sort of being a white thing. And, the New York City public school system is funded by, local property taxes, so that the schools that are in most need, with the poorest populations have the lowest funding. And, I have a multiracial family. I have a Latino grandson who's going to school in the Bronx, and they have the Beacon after-school program there, but there isn't enough room in that program for him. So there's no after-school available for my grandson. And, I wonder how people function, how they go to work, how, parents might work if they didn't have, opportunities that my grandson has because through me.
All right, thank you. We have to take quick questions because they really are running out of
Well,
time.
I have one more thing I'd like to say.
Okay.
I think I really appreciate having these young high school students on this panel, but on the previous panel. But I guess that they're very fortunate that they don't have an arrest record, and because of the stop and frisk laws, rules that are policy that's still in effect with our Mayor de Blasio, that you can offer all of the programs that all of you people have presented, and they're all wonderful. But these kids have any kind of an arrest record, and they'll never get a job. They probably won't graduate from high school, and those are the systemic issues I think that need to be addressed. So my question is, like, how do you
Address it.
yes, take
Okay,
it?
so two quick questions, please.
Last
And then one more over there. Go ahead.
My name is Erin, and I work in the Center for Excellence in Youth Education at Mount Sinai. And we're working actually with 3 Eagle Academy campuses, Eagle, Bronx, and Brooklyn, to develop a biomedical research program. And I just had a question on how do we engage the students, the young men of color's parents, to be involved in their education and to acknowledge their science accomplishments, and also ways to have them be interested and think it's a reality for them.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sonia Dave. I'm a mental health counselor, and I work primarily with young males that have been formerly incarcerated. And my question is for you all, how are you going to engage your young males that are in school that may come in with some traumas and different things that don't have to be as debilitating as people may want to make, but they just may need someone to talk to? One of the things that I definitely understand with Mr. Banks, boys are different, and I get men to talk. And because I create a very safe environment for them, and I mean from gang members to guys that have done things that you read about in the newspaper, but they definitely need that environment to talk, and they can fly from that point. But you need something, because for a lot of them, school is their refuge. So how can you incorporate something within the school that will give them a safe place to talk, to get through that, where they don't have to end up in prison or in jail? Because I can just tell you this last thing from the voice of many of them, they want to be rescued. They want to be rescued. There is a shame that's attached to what they've done. I'm working with a few all the time, but anyway, there's a shame attached to that. They do want to go to school, and they want someone to take them, because most of them, my clients, are leaving by the 10th grade. And I ask them all the time, what's going on in the 10th grade that y'all are leaving? But they want someone that's just going to be caring. I've heard a lot of them say teachers don't care, but when they come into school with some issues, where can they go and just talk to someone without feeling like they're going to be diagnosed and shipped out someplace else?
All right. So I apologize, but the panelists really only have like 40 seconds to respond each. But so we're going to go this way and go down first. So you'll get the last word. Okay, you're first.
I'm going to go with the last question, okay? We have what we call a team center, and what the problem in schools is that social workers and psychologists are overloaded, do testing, do this, do this, do this. I don't do any testing at all. I haven't done testing in about 10 years. And what we do is we have interns come in, we train them to meet the students as they come in. The team center is a counseling center. It's for crisis intervention. We teach conflict mediation and the like. You can build these if your district is willing to expend the monies. And one of the ways to get them to expend those funds has to do with the fact that you're servicing a heck of a lot more students than otherwise would be serviced.
I recall the mindset piece. I think you're fortunate that you're in a charter school, and so there are different channels that maybe with the DOE that we cannot negotiate, that you can bring in different curriculum, you can bring in different community-based organizations to support you in the school day. From basic knowledge, I understand charter schools have longer school days, so the connection between day school and after school looks very different, but there are many community-based organizations that receive funding from us who want to engage with a charter school, and we have, specific targeted information funding for specific age ranges. So if, for example, we also manage a service learning initiative, which is targeted for middle to high school students, and they want to work inside schools with young people. Our community-based organizations, when they're writing these RFPs, when they're responding to them, they always have to demonstrate that they're going to partner with an educational institution or community center. So I would reach out to some of those folks and see how their programming can support you in terms of mindset. What comes with that community-based organization partnership is the staff. And we ask that the staff be culturally, connected to the population that they serve. And then all of the programming that happens after school, we try to make it creative, but it has a lot of youth voice. And a lot of the curriculum that comes out of it, we offer the training to the day school teachers as well, as long as they're part of the after-school program that's in that building. So I would encourage you to try that.
40 seconds.
I'm gonna do 2 and 40 seconds. Here we go. On the mindset piece, I mean, if you ever sat in a kindergarten classroom and watched young people left to themselves, they actually do pretty spectacular and amazing things. So if you get in a high school classroom or a middle school classroom, assume that a young person, even if they're black and brown, left to themselves will actually do spectacular and amazing things and not set up a command and control structure around young people. 2, on the where do people go to talk about things that are coming in from outside the school. I think in some of the new schools that we've opened, we had a partnership with the organization called Brotherhood Sister Soul up in Harlem, and we actually run rites of passage programs inside the school day. I think Dr. Nagara talked about it earlier around rites, prison being a rites of passage. So how do we begin to give a different definition of what a rite of passage is for a young man and a young woman? So we have single gender groups that attempt to do this in the scope of a school day. If you want to know more about it, I'm happy to put you in touch with the schools that are doing it on the ground day to day.
Thank you.
Agency and defiance. I think that as teachers, as parents, as even young people trying to deal with the current society and its instruments of education, the first thing we've got to enable and support is a sense of agency, a sense that I have a responsibility and the capability of figuring out what in the situation is the best course for me and my people, let's call it the common cause, and where there is resistance to it, where the opportunity doesn't exist, to defy it. My oldest son, who's now an anthropologist, was having trouble getting through high school. He told me some years later that when he discovered that what high school was about actually mapped on to his agenda, his political agenda, what he was trying to do with himself and his colleagues, he was able to make sense out of the resource that high school was. Agency, defiance.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was that short?
I wrote a book called SOAR, How Boys Learn, Succeed, and Develop Character. And in it, I talk about, I think, some of the essential components of the work that we do at the Eagle Academy, how we engage parents, the things that you have to do to meet the parents halfway. Just as a quick example, we have all of our meetings with parents on Saturday mornings. Most schools have their meetings on a Wednesday, Thursday night at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and they get the same 20 people that show up. We get standing room only because parents, I think, are very appreciative of the fact that we are meeting them halfway. I think what's missing, Eagle is doing well. We can certainly do better there. I think you can point to a great teacher here, there, the other. I think what's missing, by and large, I was a school teacher for 6 years. I was an assistant principal for 2 years. I was a New York City school founding principal of 2 different schools over the course of 11 years. And now I've been running the Eagle Academy for almost 7 years. I've been in this work. I know what it is. I know what it looks like. I know what it feels like, seeing chancellors come and go. This kind of conversation that we're having here today, it's a drop in the bucket, but it's an important conversation. But I would suggest to you it's a conversation that does not happen in a large kind of way, in a more scaled kind of way. We're not having real conversations with our teachers who are working with our young people. There's no real marriage of those who are doing the research, who have learned so much, with the people who are on the ground, being the practitioners. So what we continue to do is we have the conversations where we basically play around and talk about this stuff on the margins, but we've not really gotten to the heart of how you can really change the system. And in order to do that, that takes leadership, That takes vision. That's going to take people who are sitting at City Hall. It's going to take people who are sitting at Tweed. It's going to take people sitting in those kinds of positions around the country. And in fact, as Dr. Gordon said, around the world. Because this issue of what's happening with black and brown boys is an international problem. It's not just a national issue. But it's going to take those kinds of conversations. Otherwise, we can point to islands of success and a teacher who cared. Because we all know, the reality is that the things that it takes to move schools and to have kids learn and do well, we already know those answers. This is not rocket science. It really is not. So even kids who've had parents who are strung out on crack and all kind of stuff, those kids can still learn. I mean, you know, but the resources have to be there, but it's the sharing of knowledge. Right around the corner where an Eagle Academy is situated, you've got kids with black boys who are struggling mightily. And yet we know some things that can help them immediately, but we're in a system that does not do a good enough job of bringing us all together. ESI, I think, is a step in the right direction. But as you said, this is a huge system, and it's going to take real strategic thinking in order to move the system in a significant way. Otherwise, we're just kind of playing around on the margin with a program here and a program there, and we can all sit on a panel discussion and have a conversation that at the end of the day kind of makes us all feel good about, you know, what we talked about. But that young man who's sitting in a school in Brownsville, none of this that we talked about has moved to the place where we're actually impacting his or her life. And if we're not about that, we're still just kind of amusing one another.
No better way to end the panel.
All right, so we have to actually begin to leave shortly, but we wanted to invite you to stay in touch with Judy and I want to thank Judy, all the way, by the way, for her yeoman job in pulling this off. And we want to be, this is going to be the one of many discussions, we hope, and trying to follow some of David Banks's admonitions to us to keep working together on these issues. So I'm sorry, because of the weather, we are going to have to stop, but please come up to us, give us your cards, stay in touch with the Twitter hashtag. Thank you. All right, thank you for coming.